Hello and good morning. As morning. This webinar is in view of other companies from the top later on. Guys, what make share over. You can try to visualize questions. Over to his
Hi, morning everybody. I'm Matt Brooks. I'm the head of HR solutions at Experian. If you bear with me 1 second, I'm just going to bring our slide deck up, and you should have visibility of that now. Yeah, good. So yes, as Natasha said, hopefully be joined by my colleague Jamie shortly, but if not, I'll be able to run through his slides when we get to his part. Just to give you a little bit of context behind what we're going to talk about today, which is tools for frictionless employee onboarding experience. So I'm sure many of you are aware, what you can see at the moment is the world of work is changing at a pace never seen before. The pace of technology change is huge, and in turn this has huge implications for the workplace and organizations. Apple are a great example. 60% of their revenues come from products that didn't exist 4 years ago. That's $159 billion worth of revenues. That speed of change creates opportunities, but it also creates challenges and risks for organizations. So the need for new skills and employee retention being a key driver, and certainly from challenges that most organizations face, it's one of the most common issues we come up against or we encounter and try and help people address. If you couple that with a reduced volume of skills and capabilities needed, what we have at the minute is a niche talent war. In effect, there's an estimated global talent deficit, as you can see on the slide there, of 85.2 million people by the year 2030. And I know 10, 11 years away feels a long time in some respects, but in lots of other respects, it feels like it's 5 minutes ago. So if you think about it, just in the workplace at present, there's an awful lot going on. Individually, any trend on its own is disruptive. If you combine these changes and the speed of change together, it can become transformative. So, for example, at the moment, 3D printing, exponentiating bandwidth, hyperconnectivity, the Internet of Things, AI, robotics, neural networks, deep analytics, autonomous vehicles, Bitcoin, blockchain, self-learning systems. You know, there's a lot of new technology out there, and all of these trends emerging together, which in turn are leading to a massively new, connected, intelligent machine that in effect is going to transform, change, challenge, and disrupt every industry, in turn every workplace, and again the skills that you need to recruit to service your customers and to service your clients. So So in the midst of all of that, it's HR's role to find the right people with the right skills and create culture where colleagues can thrive. Yet what we see is only 37% of organisations actually understand what skills they need. On top of that, in the workforce, we've got an ever-growing number of retirements. The figures on the screen there are from the US market, but in the US, 10,000 people a day retiring from servicing customers and clients. AI and robotics, very much current buzzwords, but the skills needed to deliver this agenda didn't exist 10 years ago. And that's not uncommon, and we're going to see more and more of that in the workplace. And really getting ahead of the next growth curve will be the key, even though we may not be clear on what that is at present. On top of trying to plug these gaps, we know that we need to be geared up for the demands of the next generation as well. So if you take Generation Z as an example, they're just as demanding as millennials. Diversity, inclusion, equality being top rated needs for their day-to-day work experiences. And that kind of involvement in the business really has to be a part of your strategy. It can't just be lip service, and it's less about the norms such as benefit packages. Retention's also an issue to consider as a younger generation look to move jobs more often. So really creating a clear pathway for your workforce is key. And just looking at that final stat there, the employed candidates per role this year compared to 2019, 7 to 1 versus 1.5 to 1. You know, ultimately what you've got is a really competitive landscape, in which creating a frictionless onboarding journey is crucial to successfully onboarding the right talent to grow your organisation. Too many pain points for candidates may result in losing the talent that you need, or higher attrition rates. So why do you need to invest in employee onboarding? There's a few stats on the screen for you there just to have a look at, and I'll touch upon a few of those. But I think first and foremost, what you see is, if you invest, is an increase in productivity for existing employees. In part because it shortens the new hire learning curve. Organisations lose up to 2.5% of total revenue to lost productivity on current employees who have to take time away from their role to help new hires. Onboarding is a crucial link between recruitment and long-term retention. Ultimately, quite often the onboarding experience is the first and lasting impression that your candidates, new colleagues, and future employees are going to experience with your organisation. You spend millions each year recruiting, qualifying and interviewing candidates, and so the cost of a bad hire can make a significant impact on the profit and growth of your organisation. And as I move over to the next slide, what you'll see are some of the challenges you face in your role and just how significant they are. So I've had a look through some of the things that people had noted as reasons why they were interested in running through this webinar. So some of the areas that you called out were communication to candidates, well, not just candidates, but between your HR team as being an issue and something you're looking to potentially redress. Consistency in the approach, having a single source of truth, automation, retention throughout the onboarding experience, harnessing innovation, streamlining and efficiency gains. That's an interesting one because it's just not sufficient to stand still in business these days. So what you did last year or what you delivered last year isn't necessarily acceptable this year, whether that's through cost cuts or an efficiency drive. Procurement consolidation, which again is an interesting one, is something we see quite often where in terms of onboarding and screening, people might be using multiple vendors to run onboarding checks in particular, rather than just running them through one supplier. Understanding best practice, changing the mindset of leaders who think it's a waste of time. A really interesting point, and something that I'm not going to digress into too much detail, but data use in HR is something that we spend an awful lot of time on. 30% of HR leaders admit they don't have the information at hand to make an informed decision, and 40% admit that they still use gut feel. Which is probably way behind where the rest of the business is in terms of how it uses information and data to make decisions. And adherence to compliance as well was up there. So there's a raft of common themes there. but most prominently engagement of the candidate and the colleague and their experience are some of the key challenges that you see, and we know that we've seen as well when onboarding. A necessary and vital aspect of the onboarding process, employment screening can often contribute to friction within the journey when manual or multiple checks are in place. You run the risk of mistakes due to human error. Your team are focused on admin and task rather than adding value to the candidate experience. Paperwork can get lost or incorrectly filed, which is a risk when it comes to audit and legislated checks such as right to work. The way you screen candidates is often the very first impression of your brand and how the organisation runs. Long processes may impact the time to hire. As we've seen, there's a need for new skills, and skills gaps means increasing competition. Hopefully the fact you've joined the webinar means that you're keen to look at ways in which you can attract the right talent and provide them with a positive, streamlined onboarding experience. And that's where we're going to take you to next. I don't know if we've got Jamie on the call. I don't think so. So what I'll do is Jamie was going to take you through how at Experian we use data and technology to improve our onboarding experience. So I'll run you through for the next 10 minutes. You can tell them Jamie, not Matt. So the Experian transformation and what we did, pretty descriptive from what's on the slides there, but some of the issues we addressed or realised we got, we had an attrition rate above the market norm. We had a time to fill vacancies which was sat at 60 days. Our process spanned across several teams in HR, so it was really complicated. We were moving the employee through our HR departments as well, so passing them off onto other teams and other people, so really disjointed. Joining the business after only one reference had been received, which for us, ultimately we're an FCA regulated organisation, and it wasn't an acceptable practice for us. As standard, we complete a 5-year occupational history check on every single employee, regardless of the level they're at. But we realised that in some cases only one reference was being received. It was a very paperwork-driven exercise. There was paper everywhere, time spent scanning and transferring paper. And particularly when I think about right to work checks as an example, I remember I started with Experian 4 or 5 years ago. I remember going through an interview process, coming into the offices, having my interviews, working in London at the time, and I had offices in Nottingham, and then having to come back before I started work at Experian after I'd been offered the job to complete my right to work check, and just to bring in a passport at 7 o'clock one morning just so that somebody could photocopy it and drop it in a filing cabinet, which in turn offers a whole or opens a whole raft of issues and concerns from a GDPR perspective, but also just from a candidate experience perspective. It wasn't great then. And we had about 3 full-time equivalent staff manually completing right to work checks as well, to make sure that we're meeting the legislation that was required. So where we moved to, a reduction in attrition rate within the first 12 months at 15%, a time to fill of 34 days down from 60, a process owned by one team from offer right the way through to first day. So as a new starter, if I had contact with anybody, it was always the same person, and it was a process or a journey that was completely focused on the employee experience. Vetting began at the offer stage and was completed before the first day, so we didn't wait until people came in. It was something that we started to do from the minute that the offer was made. We moved to a paper-free exercise, so time saved dealing with paper and reduction in postage costs. And then also from an efficiency and a cost-saving perspective, we moved to an automated right-to-work checking process, which allowed us to reduce 2.5 full-time equivalent staff from our operation. So this is the transformation our own Experian team went through to streamline our onboarding process. Out of this in particular came significant improvements in our background checking processes, mainly digitising and reducing the time to check, which ultimately added to improvements to the time to fill, becoming paper-free, and the employee experience My HR team at the time also consulted our team of product developers and decided to create a new process for right to work checks, which is where our automated right to work checking process came. A process that adhered to the Home Office requirements for a right to work check, but was also cost effective and easy for HR teams to implement while enhancing the onboarding experience for candidates. It's something which we've now rolled out to clients who've equally seen significant improvements in terms of cost, time, and candidate experience, and most importantly, from a compliance and a legislation perspective as well. Our average screening time now for new starters is 7 to 8 days. At the extreme, we're looking at 10 days. And that also includes FCA regulation and rechecks. We revet, as best practice, we revet about 12% of our workforce at random as well each year, and that drops into the same process as part of the onboarding team, so they're familiar with the processes and everything that goes with it, from what by then is an existing employee, so their experience of going through the revetting. We developed further, so things like our right to work solution, which we rolled out about a year ago, now has facial recognition, document validation, and character recognition in it. So we've digitized further, really. There's information, there's documents that are captured that we're able to use for criminal record checks, for example, just to simplify the process further. And going forward in the future, we'll be incorporating AI technology further to meet the needs of the changing technology landscape and younger generations. Building an employee-centric process. Experian, what we did was we created a dedicated onboarding team to put our customer at the center of the journey, rather than asking them to move around us. The onboarding team engaged with our people managers throughout the customer journey to ensure everything is in place for their first day. So if myself as a people manager, if I'm hiring a new starter, then I have dedicated support from our onboarding team, and I work closely with them. And as I said earlier, they become the sole point of contact for the new starter as well. A lot of the work that we do with clients involves reviewing their current screening processes reviewing their current screening process as part of their overall improvements to onboarding. We often see a lot of the common challenges we spoke about earlier when reviewing this process. Things like being paper heavy, a concern for a lack of efficiency, lots of manual checks in place, internal HR teams having to go several different places to validate information and complete background checking, potentially keying the same information lots of times over, or having I suppose a lack of knowledge around application tracking systems and in what ways they can automate and integrate the HR setup so that it can work more fluidly. And it is it's a very common theme we come across, where people might have 5 or 6 different suppliers that they're using and going out to and rekeying information, rather than now what they do is just they key the ones through Experian, or if it's going through an automated process, potentially not even keying. I think in terms of just to run through some of the future trends that we expect to see, and a little bit of background information in terms of what our team are looking at the moment. I've dropped some of the trends that in some cases already touched upon. So things like only 37% of organisations actually understanding what skills they need, the 10,000 requirements a day in the US, Generation Z demands, disruptive technology, etc. They're detailed in the slide that you've got in front of you. There are a few areas, a number of areas there you can see that we're currently we're either working on actively, or we're aware that they are future trends we expect to see. I think one of the largest areas of constant change, though, that we've picked up on and we're trying to work around in general is data, and that's as prevalent in HR as it is in any other walk of life. The amount of data we produce every day is just truly mind-boggling. I'm going to throw some stats at you just to kind of drive home where we are as, well, I suppose ultimately as a society now. But the 2.5 quintillion bytes of data created each day at our current pace of data generation. And that's a pace that's accelerating with the growth, in particular of the Internet of Things. Over the last 2 years alone, 90% of the data in the world was generated. Whilst it's almost impossible to wrap your mind around these numbers, what I've got below are a few illustrations of some of the ways we create these colossal amounts of data on a daily basis. So kind of things we can look at the moment, we conduct more than half of our web searches from a mobile phone now. That's a big change, and it's something that changes the onboarding experience as well for your candidates and your employees as you move away from obviously from laptops and computers. More than 3.7 billion humans use the internet, and that's a growth rate of 7.5% over 2 years ago. On average, Google now processes more than 40,000 searches every second. That's 3.5 billion searches per day. Every minute of the day, more than 120 professionals join LinkedIn. Every minute of the day, users watch over 4 million YouTube videos. We send 16 million text messages. Then 990,000 Tinder swipes. 156 million emails are sent. Every minute, there are 103 million spam emails sent. 154,000 calls on Skype. The Weather Channel alone receives 18 million forecast requests every minute. Spotify had 30 new songs. Uber riders take 46,000 trips every minute. And there are 600 new page edits to Wikipedia. The Internet of Things, which you just mentioned there, which connects smart devices that interact with each other and with us ultimately, while collecting all kinds of data, is exploding. From just 2 billion devices in 2006, there'll be a projected 200 billion devices by 2020, and it is one of the primary drivers for our data vaults exploding as well. I mean, running through those numbers, that's a very stat-heavy slide, and I'm quite happy to share that with anybody who wants more information around data and where it's coming from. But if we can leave you with, I suppose, with one more stat to kind of drive home the impact that data is having on our lives. The data created in 1 minute today is greater than all of the data that existed by the year 2000. So harnessing and making sense of that information, certainly for us and for Experian, will be one of the greatest challenges that we will face, and we think HR teams will face in the next few years as well.
Excellent, thank
That was really
really insightful. Thank you very much. That was a mega load of data and stats as well. So thank you very much for that. Apologies, I think it was my fault, but obviously going through Matt and Jamie's slides, the recruitment trends in the future, I think we should have gone after Sky, but that's absolutely fine. It's not an issue. But we are going to hand over to Cherie and Maureen from Sky now, who are going to talk us through a little bit about some of the challenges that they've had and some of the bits and pieces as well. So over to you guys.
Hi, morning. I'm just going to share my screen, so bear with me.
Yep, looks great.
Okay. So over the last 6 months or so, we have at Sky looked to transform the way we bring candidates into Sky for both our volume and our non-volume areas of the business. So obviously Sky is such a large company, it's key that we recruit the best talent, and also every candidate that we do bring in is also a potential customer of Sky. So myself and Maureen, we have one other department manager, Valerie, and we work very closely with our in-house recruitment team, who are predominantly based down in our head office in London. We basically pick up the onboarding from the point that an offer is made to candidates. And we basically wanted to make sure that they all had the same journey and had full support on the way through. Even if they're unsuccessful, we want them to still have had a good recruitment experience. So it was with all that in mind that our director made the decision to review and relaunch our whole recruitment and onboarding approach. So volume recruitment that Mo will talk to you about shortly, we bring in around 3,500 candidates per year in the volume areas of the business. Phase 1, which went live in July, was to introduce a much more digitised process for those candidates and also to provide a help desk to support them. We also looked to move to people basically getting a contract in their hand within 24 hours of an offer being made verbally. So that phase that Maureen will take you through was introduced in 1st of July this year, and phase 2, this project team are reviewing that, and the current plans for that implementation are February 2020. The non-volume areas of business that I look after, we bring in around 3,000 candidates, and what was previously a very transactional onboarding service, we moved that to a very engaging white glove approach. So every candidate has a dedicated onboarder within my team that supports them through all the stages, including their Experian checks and stuff. And that lets them successfully join Sky, and it also keeps them informed of the progress along the way. That went live more recently on the 1st of September, and phase 2 is planned for April next year. So I'll hand you over to Maureen, who will take you through the volume onboarding enhancements.
Hi guys, let's talk us through the pre-volume onboarding enhancement and what led to the changes. So the volume business areas are very typically our engineers and women in home service as well, with a big drive on women engineers, contact centre advisors in service and sales, and kind of retail advisors that are out there in your shopping malls, etc. So originally the candidate would complete quite a lengthy online application and an assessment at that stage. If they were successful, they would come through to an experience day, which again was a full day at that point, with a lot of people in the room doing different assessments with them, group exercises. There was a lot of face-to-face interviews, so a lot of resource required in terms of managing these interviews. All the candidate queries were managed by and that was our outsourced partners. And then the offers were sent to onboarding team for us by the recruitment guys for processing. Then us as an onboarding team would issue the contract, start all the onboarding tasks, go through the Experian link, and at that point it was a 20 hours of 9 to 4. As Cherie had said, from the 1st of July was a decision to streamline this process and implement a much more digital recruitment experience for the candidates. So it took a lot of manual intervention away. So we introduced shorter applications. The interview was digital, and we introduced an assessment tool called Launchpad. At that point, or this point now, if the candidates are successful, they are then invited to a Sky Experience Day, which typically is now about 3 hours as opposed to the full day as it was previous. In my team, with the volume offers, they introduced a help desk, and that was to help with the assessment tool, more or less, with Launchpad and the recruiters. So if the guys maybe needed more time to do their assessment, we could look at that. We were there on hand to answer questions within an SLA well, as soon as it came in, and certainly by next day. So we also look at all the queries, any technical difficulties, and work hand in hand with Launchpad and Manpower, our recruiters. Our offers are then sent out by my team, and I know Cherie said earlier, 24 hours, we next day, we get them out. And so far, we are all managing 100% on that, which is a fabulous service for the customers. The help desk team had to go through some technical training for the Launchpad tool, and that previously sat in the recruitment team. So it was to ensure that there was no delay for the candidate, that the recruiters could do their part, and my team as the onboarders could take on some of those tasks. The contracts are issued, as I say, next day, of the offers being made to us, of the verbal offers that are being made. And we changed the service hours, so the teams are now available from 8 in the morning till 7 at night. And we also offer a Saturday service, which keeps that SLA of next day. So that's that one.
Yeah. Okay, so the non-volume world that I look after, it oversees all candidates joining the business in roles where the hiring managers predominantly only backfilling 1 or 2 roles. So out with all those volume areas that Mo looks after, my team see everyone in up to director level. Director level and above are then managed by a separate VIP team who provide the most enhanced onboarding service, obviously, due to the level. So my team sees everyone else. It tends to be your more back office and support roles. A lot of our head office roles down in London within production and stuff come through my team. And our technology areas is also a huge driver for those offers. So previously, before the enhancements, the recruitment team that work in-house down in London, they would support their hiring managers and business areas with their candidate selection. The offer would be sent to my team for processing, and again, we work to a 40-hour SLA Monday to Friday to get those contracts out and start those Experian checks. One thing I would say is we have a lot of overseas workers coming over, so we tend to have to provide more time for those background checks to come back, which again could impede someone's start date. So we tend to ask the business for at least 10 days prior to start date to allow time for background checks to come back. Previously, if the candidate had any queries, their only point of contact was the recruiter who had made the offer, who again wouldn't have full knowledge of a lot of the detail within contracts because it's very HR based, or they would have our generalist HR service who are phone and email based for employees. Candidates could also call them with queries. The candidate and hiring manager receive very auto-generated standard emails. So our onboarding system, we use Taleo to generate contracts, and it would generate a very standard, here is your contract, here is your... And that was about it. And there was then no further contact with a candidate unless they had an issue logging on to onboarding or they had a query. They were basically left until day one. So the decision was to transform that into almost to mirror the VIP service on a slightly smaller scale. So an interactive, proactive and engaging support service for every candidate and hiring manager. So candidates, we would agree with them really early on what support they need and what contact they want to have, because some people are happy to accept a contract and then leave it at that. Some people feel that they need a bit extra support. So the new process that went live in September, the recruitment team still do their bit. Everything is the same up to point of offer. And then it comes to our team. We have also mirrored volume and changed. So we look for same day or within 24 hours for the contracts to go out. We've also extended opening times within the team to accommodate that SLA. We then generate a very bespoke email to the candidate. My onboarder will be a single point of contact. The team now have things like mobile phones so that they're on hand, and it's just to make it easier for candidates to get in touch, so they're not calling a service desk and then having to get transferred. They have that direct link to an onboarder, and they've got them there, that and an email address for any queries, any issues. We have also increased the communications that we have to hiring managers, so they are emailed at the start when we send that contract to let them know, and also to give them a bit on what their journey will look like up till that start date, because there's things that they need to do behind the scenes, like ordering equipment, laptops, you know, arranging passes for day one, recruit readiness. Go through the recruitment process every few years, and you know, things change so quickly with technology and how we do things within our IT teams, so it's important that we keep those guys updated. And then all queries are picked up and there is regular contact maintained with the candidate. We also send them a pre-starter email the week before to confirm that their Experian checks are back, to confirm, you know, things like our ocean rescue campaign means that on day one you can't buy a plastic bottle of water or anything, so it's really important that we let these people know they will have to bring, you know, a reusable cup or a bottle. And it's small things like that. You know, we have a cashless restaurants on our site, so it's things, you know, remember to bring your bank card to top up your pass, all those things that might be missed and can impact someone not just during their onboarding but on their first day in the business. So yeah, it's landed reasonably well, and candidate feedback so far has been very beneficial.
I've recently just had 2 or 3 new starters, so the difference in the communication from a hiring manager's point of view to what it's been in the past it's night and day. It's really, really useful.
So obviously we've touched on these are still ongoing projects within the business. There is project teams down in London still looking at phase 2 of those transformations and what they will look like. So the plans for February for volume, we are looking to have even more digitisation, potentially a bit of AI who will, at the moment, those online assessments, there's still some human intervention to score those. The plans at the moment are to look at some AI that would auto score people's assessments as they're coming through, including the video assessment based on what answer they give. Also the expanding the help desk just to maybe pick up even more queries than just system and technical.
Absolutely, which would help the recruiters out there as well, so yeah.
And then in March 2020 at the moment, phase 2 for non-volume is looking at the launch of a new candidate onboarding portal. So I've seen very early stages of the design. Basically at the point we send a contract, we would generate a link to the candidate to go on and log on, and it will be very role specific. So if they are moving to a role up here in Livingston, they would office just telling them a lot about our culture at Sky, our purpose and values, which are really a big focus for us within our staff, and also some of the benefits, what's available to them, how they get that when they join, how they sign up, and just really, you know, our predominant social media platform, that hashtag Life at Sky, is to let people see what it would be like to work for us, and this just is an enhanced version of that to really get people hyped up before they come in on day one, as soon as they know that an offer of employment has been made.
Yeah, excellent.
So
Thank you very much. That was really insightful.
Us.
Great to see some of the stuff that you're doing. It's, as I said, it's a hot topic at the moment, so it's great to see some of the stuff that you're doing. We have had a question from Adam Myers, which I think is directed to you both. Is how do you collect your candidate feedback who've been through this new onboarding experience?
We have this what we found when we've reviewed that as part of this is that it's probably not as fresh in people's minds as we would like at that point, and it tries to encompass a lot of information. So part of these transformations, we're working very closely with Glint and looking at splitting out those surveys into smaller surveys.
Chunks.
So one at the point of offer, which covers the recruitment experience to date, and one at the point of, you know, maybe 2 weeks after they've joined the business, which would cover that onboarding. And that will give us more enhanced feedback and ways of improving going forward. So we're aiming to roll that out by hopefully January. Yeah. So the challenge we've had at the moment is we have so many different systems that we use, and they don't all communicate with each other. So we use Taleo predominantly for onboarding. We use Salesforce for our case management, and we use, obviously we have our own internal HR system, which is where we create all the records, and then we have Experian. So at the moment it is a challenge. There is a project coming to look at streamlining the systems we use into potentially one, and that kicks off in January for 2 years. And if we can implement the system we're looking at, then everything would be done
on one platform.
Yeah, I think there's probably 2 steps at this point. One is for some people it's the initial move towards automation anyway. So I alluded to it earlier, but what you might have from an onboarding process, certainly from a screening and a revetting perspective, is that you're already using multiple suppliers. So one step is to consolidate those down into one. So you might be, especially if you're a regulated business, so whether that's councils, hospitals, financial services, you might be using the DBS for one. You might be using a company such as a sales for credit checking. You might be using Companies House for directorship checks, another company for sanctions checks, and each time you're keying in. So that the first step really is that we help organisations with is to move into one system of record and reduce all that keying. In an ideal world, and getting more towards what Sky are working towards as well in their processes, is making it via an API or some form of API. So what we would normally do is our check potentially becomes the seamless part of the onboarding process. So if you take Taleo as an example, where we plug into the HR system or the application tracking system, and there will be almost no involvement from an employee perspective, because everything is just pushed and pulled automatically behind the scenes, right the way through to the candidate experience side of things, where if you've got all the information that you require for you to onboard a new starter, it will push that through. So potentially there's almost no need to complete an application form again from a candidate experience perspective. So ease up the journey, but also makes a big difference to their experience as well.
So for non-volume, as I say, we ask for around 10 days, and it's more to allow for those background checks. We won't let someone start in a business without a clear CRC. And then obviously overseas, if it's an overseas candidate, we ask for 4 weeks. Often if the checks come back prior to that time, we will look at superseding the start date to bring the candidate in. In terms of though the actual, for what the candidate has to do, it's usually within that sort of 48 hours from point of offer, providing that the candidate completes everything on day one, but it's predominantly based on us getting those checks back before they start. Volume's
slightly different in respect. It's ideally 3 weeks, but that doesn't always happen. And the population that we deal with can come into the business without a clear CRC, because we don't hold them up as long as we've got the right to work. We don't hold it up. And obviously, if there's anything that then is negative, we would deal with that as an exception rather than a rule.
So they're allowed to start because they're in a training academy for 4 weeks, so they're not accessing systems, or they're in a room for 4 weeks, basically going through a lot of training. So, and
then if the checks are still not back at that point, they're not allowed to go live in the business. So my team proactively work through, Experian. We've introduced a model day format of working where these are checked daily for the intakes. So we work on the next, in volume, we work on the next few weeks intake. So we've got the forecasted figures of who's coming in, so that we can keep an eye on that, so nobody's in the business without or going live, certainly without
I alluded to it earlier, but we run a 7 to 8 day lead time for onboarding. A variety of reasons for that, but I think ultimately the delay there, and we do see that as a delay, we'd still, our ongoing challenge is to keep driving that down and be ever competitive in that respect. But the ongoing challenge is probably around referencing. So most of what we need to complete from an onboarding perspective, it is instant, or is back within a few hours. So even things like criminal record checks can be back same day in some cases. Tends to be referencing, which really pushes it to the 7 to 8 days. But even we automate them in that respect as well. So there's a few always looking for improvements, but we try and keep it as quick as we can at our end.
We did go through a change to the referencing of a couple of years ago now, I think it was, where we used to have 2 and 5 years history.
I think as well, just
in some areas now, which is a big difference, but yeah, still getting them back.
Bulk volumes of checks as well, so we're going to revet. That might be 12% of our workforce. It can be as much as 20%. We work with clients who do 100% revetting every year, so it can be thousands of checks at once. But what we do, we feed them into the system as one Excel upload or CSV document, and start the process off automatically. So that, again, just reduces the key in time that the likes of people like Sky would otherwise be having to sit there and put into a system.
Okay.
So we get a lot of feedback from hiring managers around their frustrations with the IT process, which unfortunately isn't something we actually manage. We have some roles that are very bespoke developer roles that need very specific laptops out with what we're issued with as standard. So things like that come to us naturally when we can't help it. Our hiring manager feedback on recruitment on onboarding is something that we're looking to target with the Glint survey. At the moment, it comes usually through a recruiter, because the recruiters look after a very specific area of the business. They have very close relationships with the hiring managers within those areas. So normally if there's feedback on the onboarding process, at the moment it comes through the recruiters, but we're hoping that the survey will change that.
We have a meeting, or certainly a couple of meetings a week with all sort of stakeholders throughout the business, which, volume, non-volume, VIP, etc. So if there's any noise around, these meetings will definitely highlight those areas. And there's also a People Plus team where managers can phone right in and escalate any sort of queries they've got, and that's a quick fire turnaround on those.
Yeah. So it's not something at the moment we have. We do have a returners programme, which is high profile. It's more for women who have left the business at some point and are looking to come back in, and it's like a fast track route back in a lot of our tech areas. Mo recently rejoined us as well. So we don't have a retention process at the moment, certainly within our area. It may be something that business specific areas have, but not something that we are. The
volume, obviously, they have a pipeline, so they have people on hold. I see one of the other questions it might answer a little bit of this. So yeah, they have a pipeline always ongoing over the weeks as well for retention. And you do get the people that don't show up on the first day, particularly in the volume world, the no-shows and stuff. So we've got a very tight communication between the recruiters, as in manpower, ourselves as a team, and also the training team that are doing inductions. So we know very, very quickly, if you like, so that who's turned up, who's not turned up, and who we can activate and who we can't, so that nobody gets paid when they shouldn't and people get paid when they should.
I could probably have a little bit of that as well.
But not quite a retention process as such, and maybe one higher up in the business.
One thing we have seen is a noticeable decrease in the dropout rate at the onboarding process. To move from that end-to-end 60-day process to 34 days, and to move to a 7 to 8 day kind of SLA around onboarding checks in general, meant that we have seen a far better retention process. And in the background as well, that there's lots of things we kind of take for granted in terms of what we do. So even simple things like having an application form that can be that's mobile compatible, so they can complete it on their phone or on their tablet, changing the application form so that it's a real simple effortless piece for people to do and candidates to complete. There's a lot of steps we've gone through that we haven't really touched upon today that just form part of what we do on a daily basis, but it has driven the retention through the onboarding process. So I'll find some of our stats out and share them afterwards as well. And I think just to touch upon Hannah's question as well next around right to work checks. So we have an app that's compatible from an Android and iOS perspective. So it works on phones and works on tablets. And we developed it in conjunction with the Home Office. And in effect, it's the 156 pages of the right to work legislation bundled into a step-by-step application, and that takes the hiring manager through what's required depending on the documentation that the candidate produces. So really, I mean, it's really useful anyway, because it captures everything that you need, and it's then a platform. But it's also something that you can open up and share with the Home Office if you were to have an audit at any point. And again, we can share more information on that. But with a lot of things, we use our hiring managers as guinea pigs before they go out to market. And
if I could say, we did trial that app. So currently, to answer Hannah's question, we have right to work taken at the recruitment stage. So it's there for us before we even send that offer out, and it is very manual. We take proof of address as well for background checks, and we trialled the right to work app during a large 2P that we've done recently for I think the portion that we used the app for was around 300 people, and it absolutely eliminated the need for any photocopying, scanning, verification. It was absolutely, a godsend for that, and we are looking at potentially trialling it again for another large intake that we've got coming up, now that there's been further enhancements to make that even more digital. But it is, yeah, I would highly recommend that one.
For someone that I've just come back into the business, I was away for a year, and the new onboarding process, like on the phone, and I was like, well, very, very seamless. So yeah, I was majorly impressed. We do to a degree. We've got a chaser processing. Once the process has started, we've then introduced quite a few. In fact, we've literally yesterday just changed the chaser process to make it more simpler. We've cut it down to 2. So that's with our managers or chasing the people in the business, or on the training days and stuff, to get the training managers to send us all the information, basically to get everybody in through. But we don't have a lot of drop off through the application process. I think it's so much easier now.
I think in the volume world, predominantly the recruiters will let us. They're normally the first to know if someone's dropping off, and will let us know. We don't see a huge amount of drop offs in the non-volume world. I think because there's a much shorter, if someone says they're available to start in 2 weeks, we can make that happen usually. We tend to find in those roles that there's longer notice periods anyway, so people are looking to start in a month or 2 months or 3 months. But within the volume areas, it's kind of managed by the recruitment. If we send an offer and we didn't get a response from the candidate and we chased twice, we would push it back to the recruiter to say, you need to go and find out what's happening. So that's kind of how we keep on top of that.
It minimises the dropouts. There's self-help pages within the application form anyway, but then we have a live chat facility for candidates to open up if they're. It's unlikely to get stuck at any point. If they get stuck at any point, there's live chat, there's email, there's phone, so that helps minimise the dropout rate due to the application form being difficult. And just to my earlier point, we did spend a lot of time and money investing in an application form that was well researched in order to make it simple and to complete. About 3 or 4 months ago as well, we launched a candidate portal. So if you're a candidate completing the form, you have access to see progress, so you can see if it's halted at any point because there's something missing. So, for example, if there's further documentation that's required, we will have asked it of them, and we would have contacted the candidate for it. But it also shows them where we might be waiting for something and delaying their start date.